Ever pondered what transpires when the world's most self-assured individual is challenged in their least proficient domain? Envision Michael Jordan, six-time NBA champion, billionaire, global icon, publicly goaded by an arrogant teenager to undertake something wholly outside his comfort zone. "I bet you'd be terrible at this," the youth declared, oblivious to the cascade of events about to irrevocably alter numerous lives. What no one anticipated was that this impulsive challenge would unveil a decades-long secret, a talent unknown even to Jordan's most meticulous biographers, a skill nurtured by his own mother, yet unseen by the world. Why would a man who'd never shied from a challenge accept such a risky gambit? And how would a 12-year-old, terrified of stepping onto a stage, find himself thrust into the spotlight of a national broadcast alongside the sport's greatest legend? This is the extraordinary narrative of how a teenage taunt morphed into a moment of pure enchantment, and how sometimes our greatest vulnerabilities can blossom into our deepest strengths. Prepare to discover the side of Michael Jordan that cameras never captured until now. The Emsley A. Laney High School auditorium thrummed with the energy of 400 students pressed tightly into the worn red velvet seats. A palpable cacophony of adolescent chatter filled the air, punctuated by nervous glances and excited whispers. Faded banners from the 1990s school championships adorned the side walls, many bearing the unmistakable silhouette of the man everyone awaited. On stage, a simple table holding a water bottle and a microphone sat under bright lights reflecting off the polished floor. The scent of aged wood and anticipation hung heavy in the air. "I can't believe he's actually coming to our school after all this time. They say he rarely accepts these career day invitations," commented a freshman girl, nervously adjusting her number 23 t-shirt. Amidst the bustling crowd, Brandon Williams tried to shrink himself, hunching his slender shoulders and sinking further into the fifth-row seat. At only 12 years old, he was noticeably smaller than the other students around him. A first-year freshman who seemed even younger behind the thick-framed glasses that constantly slid down his delicate nose. The oversized gray sweatshirt he wore, 2 sizes too large, served as a protective shield, its hood partially obscuring his delicate, brown-skinned face. His dark, attentive eyes darted nervously across the hall, monitoring every reaction, every comment, as if calculating the precise moment his connection to the honored guest would be discovered. "He's really coming, right?" Jaden Martinez whispered, leaning close to his friend. His close-cropped, curly hair framed a perpetually animated face, his eyes sparkling with barely contained excitement. "Michael Jordan! Dude, I can't believe you never told me he's your mentor. How could you hide that for so long?" Brandon sighed deeply, the familiar weight of anxiety pressing on his chest. The secret he had worked so hard to maintain was about to be exposed before the entire school, a place where he already felt like an outsider, an intruder who didn't belong. The words came out as a defensive murmur. "Please, don't talk so loud. I didn't want anyone to know. You know how people are when they discover this sort of thing. Suddenly, nobody sees me as just me anymore." A sharp, feedback-laden hiss from the sound system startled everyone. Principal Amanda Jameson, a woman in her 50s with a military bearing and a rarely seen smile, adjusted the microphone with precise gestures. Her dark gray suit and severe, tightly wound brown hair further underscored her unquestionable authority. Silence gradually descended upon the auditorium as she cleared her throat, a gesture all the students recognized as the prelude to an important announcement. Her eyes scanned the crowd, imposing order without needing to verbalize it. "Laney High students, it is with immense pride that we introduce our special guest for Career Day." She paused dramatically, her usually austere face softening into a genuine smile. "Michael Jordan." The reaction was instantaneous and deafening. An eruption of cheers, applause, and whistles shook the auditorium like a sonic wave. Students leaped from their seats, cell phones raised to capture the moment. Brandon huddled further, pulling his hoodie almost completely over his face, while Jaden beside him roared as loud as his lungs would allow. "It's him! It's really him!" Michael Jordan's imposing figure emerged from the left side of the stage, moving with that athletic grace that the years had not diminished. At 62, he remained a magnetic presence, dominating any space he occupied. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that highlighted his broad shoulders and upright posture. His signature smile, the one that had sold billions of products worldwide, illuminated a face etched with lines that only added to his character. His shaved head gleamed under the auditorium lights, and his eyes, those same intense eyes that had conveyed fierce determination in countless court battles, now held a serene composure acquired only by those who had proven everything they had to prove. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's good to be back in Wilmington, and especially in this school that holds such special significance in my journey, Jordan said, his baritone voice resonating through the sound system with a clarity that immediately silenced the crowd. Certain locales shape us in ways we fully grasp only years later, and this is definitively one of those places for me. For the next 20 minutes, Jordan recounted his trajectory from the streets of Wilmington to becoming the most recognizable name in global basketball. He spoke of challenges, failures, and the relentless mentality that propelled him beyond every obstacle. He detailed the transition from the courts to the business world, the construction of his empire, and how he learned to transform his competitiveness into entrepreneurial vision. With the same eloquence that characterized his court moves, he navigated between tales of NBA championships and philanthropic initiatives, holding 400 typically restless and distracted teenagers in rapt, absolute silence. Brandon observed, torn between the pride of meeting the man on stage in person and the fear of what would happen when everyone learned of their connection. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about winning, but about reacting when you lose, when you fail, when you're cut from the team, Jordan said, his gaze momentarily meeting Brandon's across the crowd. A small, almost imperceptible smile of recognition passed between them. Because we all fall at some point. The question is, how many times are you willing to get back up? The Q&A session began orderly. Students timidly raised hands, posing expected questions about records, pivotal moments, and advice for aspiring athletes. Jordan responded with the same blend of charisma and sincerity that marked his interviews, alternating between inspiring stories and good-natured observations that elicited laughter from the audience. Principal Jameson managed the questioning order with the efficiency of a referee until she noticed a hand raised in the middle section of the auditorium. Her gaze narrowed slightly, but she maintained protocol. "Yes, Tyler, you have a question?" The hesitation in her voice was subtle, yet perceptible to those familiar with the student's reputation. Tyler Jenkins rose slowly, savoring his moment in the spotlight. Tall for his 16 years with an athletic physique, sculpted by years in school sports teams, he sported the same haircut Jordan favored in the 90s, a deliberate choice that now seemed almost defiant. The basketball team's uniform stood out amidst the casual attire of the other students, as if implicitly seeking connection with the legendary visitor. His angular face, usually fixed in an expression of casual superiority, now displayed a mischievous grin that made Brandon instinctively recoil. Something about Tyler's posture, the way his eyes gleamed with a kind of anticipatory satisfaction, signaled trouble. "Mr. Jordan, everyone knows you're the best at basketball, and now you're a billionaire." Tyler paused, sweeping his gaze around to ensure he had everyone's attention. His naturally loud voice seemed engineered to reach every corner of the auditorium. "But there must be something you're truly bad at, right? I mean, nobody can be good at absolutely everything." A murmur of unease rippled through the auditorium. Principal Jameson immediately advanced toward the microphone, her face hardening with evident disapproval. Lines etched deeper into her forehead as she swiftly interjected, "Tyler, that question is inappropriate." "No, it's perfectly fine," Jordan interrupted with a calm hand gesture, his smile unwavering. Decades of facing the press and critics had granted him a near-supernatural ability to maintain composure. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, his eyes fixed on Tyler with calculated intensity. "It's a fair question. There are many things I'm not good at. My golf has improved considerably, but it used to be dreadful. Ask Charles Barkley about that." The audience chuckled, momentarily easing the tension. "And I've never learned to cook anything beyond basic sandwiches. My family is thankful I have staff to handle that now." Further laughter echoed through the auditorium, but Tyler didn't seem satisfied with the response. His eyes narrowed slightly, and Brandon recognized the expression, the same one Tyler wore before cornering some freshmen in the hallways. Brandon's stomach twisted with a sense of impending dread. He knew this look well, having been its victim more than once in the short time since he'd enrolled at Laney High. "And what about singing?" Tyler persisted, his voice carrying a barely concealed tone of challenge. "I bet you'd be terrible at that. I can't imagine Michael Jordan singing. It's like watching a fish try to walk, isn't it?" A few nervous giggles punctuated the comment, but most students remained in tense silence, feeling the shift in the atmosphere. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the auditorium. Several teachers exchanged worried glances, while some older students shook their heads in disbelief at Tyler's audacity. Brandon himself felt his heart quicken, torn between indignation at the disrespect shown to his mentor and fear of what might follow. Beside him, Jaden whispered, "What does that jerk think he's doing? He can't talk to Michael Jordan like that." The momentary silence was shattered when Tyler, seemingly emboldened by his own brashness and the lack of immediate reprimand, continued his provocation. His entire body now leaned forward, like a predator poised to strike. "Actually, our talent show is next week. I'll bet $50 you wouldn't last 30 seconds on stage without everyone laughing. Imagine the great Michael Jordan trying to sing." He scanned the room, seeking approval from his peers, but found mostly expressions of shock and discomfort. "Tyler Jenkins," Director Jameson's voice sliced through the air like a whip, imbued with authority and outrage. Her usually controlled face now displayed angry red blotches. "Apologize immediately. This kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable and does not represent the values of this institution." She moved to partially block the microphone, as if attempting to quell the escalating incident. The auditorium fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Hundreds of eyes flitted between the legendary guest and the arrogant teenager, anticipating the inevitable eruption. Brandon sank further into his seat, mortified by the situation and acutely aware that somehow his connection to Jordan made this moment profoundly personal. He pulled the hood of his sweatshirt tighter, wishing he could disappear entirely. His fingers tightened around the chair arm until his knuckles turned white, while his mind raced through increasingly catastrophic scenarios. This is going to end badly, Brandon thought, his heart pounding against his ribs. And somehow they're going to drag me into it. This always happened. To everyone's astonishment, perhaps even more so for Brandon, who knew Jordan's competitive spirit, a slow smile began to form on the former player's face. It wasn't his customary, commercial or diplomatic smile, but rather the one that surfaced when he perceived a challenge he intended to accept. It was the same smile that millions of fans recognized from moments before Jordan decimated an overconfident opponent on the court. His eyes blazed with that characteristic intensity that made opponents recoil, and he subtly adjusted his posture, like a predator assessing its prey. The silence in the auditorium became almost palpable as all awaited the response. "A talent show, eh?" Jordan finally spoke, his voice surprisingly smooth and controlled, amplified by the sound system that captured every nuance. He took 2 steps forward on the stage, drawing closer to the edge, his eyes fixed on Tyler with an intensity that made the teenager visibly recoil. "And what would be the prize? Besides the satisfaction of proving your point, of course?" The tone was light, almost playful, yet everyone in the auditorium could feel the underlying current of competitiveness that had transformed a Wilmington boy into the world's greatest basketball legend. Tyler, momentarily discombobulated by the unexpected response, quickly regained his composure. A mixture of surprise and excitement crossed his face as he processed that Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan, was actually considering his ludicrous challenge. "A $1,000 scholarship and a trophy," Tyler replied, his voice slightly less confident now. "That's what the winner gets. But obviously it wouldn't mean anything to someone like you." Jordan nodded slowly, considering the information as his fingers lightly tapped the table. The seconds dragged on as the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath collectively. Then, with the same deliberate composure, he posed a question that made it abundantly clear the dynamic of the confrontation had completely shifted. And if I were to accept your challenge, what would be at stake beyond your paltry winnings? $50 doesn't seem to pose much of a risk for you. The question caught Tyler off guard. He hesitated, clearly not having anticipated that Jordan would take the challenge seriously. His eyes darted nervously around the auditorium, searching for inspiration, until his gaze fell upon the former player's feet. A slow, calculating smile spread across his face. If you participate and it's a disaster, I want those exclusive Air Jordan sneakers you're wearing. Signed. He gestured toward the limited edition, custom-made shoes, reserved for Jordan's inner circle. An item collectors would pay tens of thousands of dollars to possess. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. The audacity was almost breathtaking. Jaden murmured beside Brandon, "Has he completely lost his mind? Those sneakers are worth more than his parents' car." The entire auditorium held its breath, time seeming to freeze in that moment of absolute tension. Principal Jameson had visibly paled, likely calculating the damage to the school's reputation and possibly her own career. The teachers appeared paralyzed, unable to intervene in what had become an almost mythical confrontation between a brash teenager and a living legend. And then, shattering the tension like a sharp blade, Michael Jordan flashed his famous smile, the same one that had graced billions of advertisements and remained unforgettable for any basketball fan. "Deal," Jordan declared, his voice resonating with a purpose that sent shockwaves through the auditorium. "See you all at the talent show." With those words, he extended a hand toward the edge of the stage, a clear signal for Tyler to step up and seal the agreement. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Students leaped from their seats as Tyler, stunned by the success of his provocation, ascended the stage to shake Jordan's hand. Cameras captured the moment the brash teenager and basketball legend sealed an improbable pact. As the commotion spread, Brandon remained motionless, his face pale with horror. His carefully constructed world, designed to keep his connection with Jordan private, was about to crumble. His eyes met Jordan's across the crowd, and the barely perceptible nod he received only confirmed his fear. He would be dragged into the center of this impossible situation. "This can't be happening," Brandon whispered, feeling his stomach churn. "My already difficult social life has just been officially sentenced to death." The sun began to set as Brandon Williams crossed the small, weathered wooden gate guarding the modest one-story house on the east side of Wilmington. The neighborhood, with its almost identical rows of houses, primarily housed middle-class and essential worker families. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, and police officers, just like his father had been. As Brandon ascended the three worn steps of the porch, the murmur of voices emanating from within the house instantly froze him. One voice, the distinctive deep baritone that had echoed through the school auditorium hours prior, shouldn't have been there, not in his living room, not now. His heart pounding, he flung the door open, letting it slam shut with a crash that abruptly silenced the conversation. In the small yet meticulously maintained living room, adorned with simple furniture and framed photographs of happier times, his mother, Vanessa Williams, sat on the love seat, a forgotten teacup resting on the coffee table. And there, practically filling the armchair that had belonged to his father, sat Michael Jordan, seemingly remarkably at ease in this modest setting, so far removed from the spotlights and opulence he was accustomed to. "You came straight to our house?" Brandon asked, his voice rising several octaves in incredulity. "Didn't you even wait for us to talk privately?" The momentary silence was shattered by the sound of rain beginning to fall outside, as if the weather were in sync with the emotional storm brewing inside the house. Brandon stood at the doorway, his school backpack still slung over one shoulder, his breath ragged from the walk from school and the turmoil churning within him. His mother, Vanessa, a woman in her 40s, bearing the weariness of double shifts as a nurse since becoming a widow, regarded her son with a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Her short, cropped curly hair framed a face that, despite the palpable exhaustion, retained the dignity and strength Brandon so deeply admired. She wore her uniform, blue pants and a white blouse bearing the hospital logo, suggesting she had just arrived or was about to leave. Jordan, in contrast, had traded his formal suit for a more casual yet still elegant ensemble. likely costing more than all the furniture in the room combined. Why did you agree? Brandon finally exploded, stepping 2 steps further into the room, his backpack thudding to the floor. His fists were clenched at his sides, and his usually serene face now displayed a flushed crimson of pure indignation. It's a trap. Don't you see? Tyler Jenkins isn't just some bully. He's calculating, manipulative. He just wants to humiliate you in front of everyone. Brandon Williams? Vanessa's voice sliced through the air with the authority only a mother could command. She rose, crossing her arms over her chest, her eyes fixed on her son with an intensity that usually sufficed to quell any adolescent rebellion. What kind of talk is that? I didn't raise you to address adults in such a manner, much less someone who has done so much for our family. Apologize right now. Jordan raised a hand in a gesture of calm, his face exhibiting not offense, but understanding. Years had taught him to read not just opponents on basketball courts, but also the intricate emotions driving people. It's all right, Vanessa. The boy has reason to be concerned. He adjusted in his armchair, leaning forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees in a posture that diminished his imposing stature, rendering him less intimidating. His eyes met Brandon's with direct sincerity. Come, sit down. Let's talk. I think you owe me at least that after that dramatic entrance. Brandon hesitated for a moment, still simmering with frustration, but the genuine expression on Jordan's face and his mother's insistent gaze eventually swayed him. Dragging his feet, he made his way to the opposite end of the couch, maintaining the maximum possible distance between himself and his mother. A small act of rebellion that neither adult missed. A heavy silence settled for a few seconds, broken only by the steady ticking of the grandfather clock and the drumming rain now falling more intensely outside. Jordan observed the boy for a moment, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his restless fingers fiddled with the hem of his hoodie, his eyes deliberately avoiding direct contact, all signs of someone grappling with emotions far greater than the immediate situation could explain. Why does this matter so much to you, Brandon? Jordan asked finally, his voice gentle yet direct, the tone of someone genuinely wanting to understand, not merely to appease. It's not just about me or my reputation, is it? There's something more here. The simple question momentarily disarmed Brandon. He opened his mouth and closed it again, as if reconsidering his words. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, imbued with a vulnerability he rarely allowed others to see. Because you don't understand what school is like for me, Brandon replied, his eyes finally meeting Jordan's, a raw honesty in their gaze. I'm constantly targeted for being James Jordan's Foundation's charity project. The kids whisper in the hallways, make jokes when they think I'm not listening, saying you're only helping me to improve your public image, that it's all publicity. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. If you make a fool of yourself in that silly talent show, if Tyler gets what he wants, it will be even worse for me. I won't just be the pathetic orphan receiving your charity. I'll be the boy associated with Michael Jordan, publicly humiliated. Brandon, Vanessa exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock at her son's brutal frankness. She moved as if to intervene more directly, but Jordan subtly signaled for her to remain where she was, silently requesting the space necessary to address the situation. The ensuing silence was filled only by the intensifying rain outside, drumming against the windows with an almost musical insistence. Jordan did not immediately respond. Instead, he studied the young face before him with genuine attentiveness, seeing beyond the superficial anger, recognizing the pain and fear fueling that outburst. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost contemplative. Brandon, you know why I chose to help you through the foundation. Among hundreds of qualified applicants, why specifically you? Brandon averted his gaze, fixing it on a photograph on the wall. He and his father, both beaming, displaying identical trophies from a local chess tournament. Because my father died like yours, he replied automatically, as if reciting a response that had been repeated so many times it had lost its original meaning. In service, a police officer like James Jordan. That was part of the reason, Jordan agreed, nodding slowly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes momentarily distant, as if revisiting personal memories. Your father was an exceptional officer, I've been told. Esteemed within the community, devoted to family, committed to making a difference. A fleeting shadow crossed his face, echoes of his own loss. But the true reason, the one that made his application stand out amongst all others, was what his guidance counselor told me about him. Brandon looked up, genuinely surprised. Ms. Patel, what did she say? She told me that even after losing your father so suddenly, under such traumatic circumstances, you didn't withdraw as one might expect. Jordan continued, a gentle smile gracing his face. On the contrary, she described how, just 3 months after the funeral, you began seeking out other students who had lost parents, forming a small, informal support group. You started a support group for children who had lost parents, not because an adult suggested it, but because you knew from personal experience how isolating that pain could be. Brandon fell silent, gazing at the worn wooden floorboards as if they held his complete attention. A flush of crimson rose to his cheeks, a mixture of shame and embarrassment at having his private actions laid bare. He had never considered that small group, now boasting 7 regular participants, as anything extraordinary. It was simply something necessary, something he would have wished for himself during the darkest days following his father's passing. A few moments of silence stretched out, each person processing their own emotions. Regarding Tyler and his challenge, Jordan resumed, subtly shifting the subject to ease Brandon's discomfort. Sometimes we need to confront bullies. I've done it my entire life, in courtrooms, in business, everywhere. He tilted his head, seeking the boy's gaze. But I've learned that the key isn't confronting them in the way they expect, playing by their rules. The secret is confronting them on our own terms, in our own way. But you don't know how to sing, Brandon insisted, raising his voice again, though the earlier accusatory tone had been replaced by genuine concern. Everyone will laugh. Tyler will get exactly what he wants, publicly humiliating you. And as a bonus, those exclusive sneakers worth a fortune. An enigmatic smile played across Jordan's face, the kind that had baffled so many opponents over the years. The indication that he knew something others didn't. The kind of smile that preceded an unexpected turn in the game. Are you so sure? Are you absolutely sure I can't sing? The question hung in the air, intriguing and unanswered, like a thrown ball yet to begin its descent. The moment was interrupted by the jarring ring of the landline on the small table beside the sofa. Vanessa, who had silently observed the interaction between her son and Jordan, reached for the phone. William's residence, she replied automatically. As she listened to the voice on the other end, her face gradually paled, lines of concern instantly etching themselves onto her forehead. Now? But the surgery was scheduled for next week. I understand. Yes, I can be there in 30 minutes. She hung up and turned to them, weariness now fully evident in her expression. It was the hospital. There was an emergency with one of Dr. Reinhardt's key patients. I have to cover an emergency shift. Her worried gaze fell on Brandon. I am truly sorry, but you will need to stay alone tonight. I can call Mrs. Peterson across the street if you'd rather not be alone. I can stay with him, Jordan offered before Brandon could respond, surprising both mother and son. He rose from the armchair with a fluid movement that belied his 62 years. I need to practice for this talent show anyway, and it would be good to have a critical and honest ear to tell me if I truly am as bad as Tyler thinks. He smiled at Brandon. Perhaps Brandon could help me, that is, if he's willing to give this old dog a chance. Vanessa hesitated, clearly taken aback by the unexpected offer. Her expression fluctuated between gratitude and concern. However much she respected and trusted Jordan, the idea of leaving her teenage son in the care of a globally renowned celebrity wasn't exactly the scenario she had envisioned for a night of emergency work. Are you sure, Michael? Brandon can be a little intense at times, and you surely have more pressing commitments. No commitment is more important than keeping promises and building bridges, Jordan replied with a seriousness that didn't match the lightness of his initial offer. There was something in his gaze, an almost solemn determination, that caused Vanessa to reconsider her hesitation. Besides, there will hardly be another moment so perfect for Brandon and me to truly connect. Without an audience, without expectations, just 2 people attempting to understand each other. The ensuing minutes were a blur of activity as Vanessa hurriedly prepared to leave, meticulously leaving instructions regarding dinner, medication, Brandon occasionally suffered from mild asthma, and emergency numbers. Though the irony of leaving emergency instructions for Michael Jordan was not lost on either of them. Brandon silently observed from the sofa, still processing the surreal turn his evening had taken. Of all the possibilities he'd imagined upon leaving school, finding himself alone at home with Michael Jordan certainly wasn't among them. "I'll be back as soon as I can, probably around 7 in the morning," Vanessa finally said, kissing the top of Brandon's head despite her evident discomfort with the gesture in Jordan's presence. She grabbed her coat and umbrella, pausing briefly at the door to cast one last concerned glance at the unlikely pair in their living room. "Be good to each other, okay? And Brandon, please, behave." The sound of the door closing and the car departing left a momentary silence in the house. Brandon and Jordan found themselves alone, confronting each other across the small living room, the physical distance mirroring the emotional chasm that had grown over the past months. The sound of rain against the windows seemed amplified in the silence, creating an acoustic bubble further isolating the moment from the outside world. For several seconds, neither spoke, like adversaries studying each other before a decisive confrontation. "Seriously, why did you accept this ridiculous challenge?" Brandon finally broke the silence, his tone now calmer with his mother gone, yet still imbued with genuine incredulity. "Of all the provocations you must have endured throughout your life, why this one? Why a conceited teenager at a high school? It makes absolutely no sense." Jordan didn't immediately respond. Instead, he walked to the window, observing the now torrential rain transforming the small front yard into muddy puddles. For a moment, he seemed lost in his own thoughts, his profile highlighted against the weak light filtering from outside. When he finally turned, Brandon's face registered an expression he had never seen before. Not the Michael Jordan of the cameras, interviews, or public appearances, but something more genuine, more vulnerable. "Brandon, there's something I need to show you," he said finally, his tone resolute. "Something that will help you understand. Get your jacket." "My jacket? Now? In this storm?" Brandon looked out the window, confused and hesitant. "Where are we going?" "To my suite at the hotel," Jordan replied, already retrieving his own jacket, carefully folded over the arm of the armchair. His eyes met Brandon's with a gravity that allowed no argument. "There's something there you need to see, something that might change your perspective on all of this." Brandon hesitated, torn between the inescapable curiosity and the persistent frustration. The rain lashed against the windows with renewed force, as if trying to dissuade them from leaving. But there was something in Jordan's expression, a rare blend of determination and vulnerability, that finally convinced the teenager. "All right," he conceded, rising to retrieve his jacket hanging near the door. "But that doesn't mean I agree with what you're doing. And it definitely doesn't mean I'm going to help you make a fool of yourself in front of the whole school." "Just enough," Jordan responded with a slight smile, opening the door to the torrential night. "I'm not asking for your approval, Brandon. Just your open mind. Sometimes things aren't exactly what they seem at first glance. Lesson number 1 I learned in life: never underestimate your opponent, but also never underestimate yourself." The sound of the door closing behind them was swallowed by the roar of the storm, as the two figures, one imposing, the other significantly smaller, hurried through the rain toward the luxurious car discreetly parked on the curb. As the vehicle pulled away down the darkened streets of Wilmington, Brandon couldn't help but feel that he was being taken far beyond a simple hotel. He was being led to a point of no return in his relationship with the man who, whether he liked it or not, had become a central figure in his life following his father's passing. "Where are we really going, Michael?" Brandon asked, using Jordan's first name for the first time that night, a small but significant sign that the barriers were beginning to fall. "What could be so crucial about this hotel that it couldn't wait until tomorrow?" "We're not just going to a place, Brandon," Jordan replied, eyes fixed on the wet road ahead. "We're going to a moment from my past known to few, a moment that might help you understand why I accepted Tyler's challenge, and perhaps, just perhaps, help you understand yourself better too." The opulent Wilmington Grand Hotel loomed as a monument to lavishness amidst the city's historic buildings. Its 20 stories of glass and steel mirrored the sunset's fiery hues, creating an almost ethereal image against the gradually darkening sky. The rain had subsided to a gentle drizzle as Jordan's car pulled up to the hotel's covered entrance. A valet swiftly opened the door, his initially professional demeanor morphing into outright surprise upon recognizing the esteemed passenger. Brandon observed with a mixture of unease and fascination as Jordan greeted each employee by name: the concierge, the receptionist, even the elevator operator, all clearly delighted by being remembered by the basketball legend. The inquisitive glances Brandon received were undeniable. Unspoken speculation about who the slender young man accompanying Michael Jordan was hung in the air-conditioned lobby. The exclusive elevator whisked them directly to the top floor, opening onto a hushed hallway adorned with contemporary art and soft lighting. Jordan swiped his key card, revealing a suite that resembled a luxury apartment more than a hotel room. "They always try to give me the presidential suite, but I prefer this one," Jordan remarked casually as he stepped inside, as if the space's opulence were a trivial detail. "The river view always reminds me why I love this city, no matter how long I'm away." The sun descended majestically over the Cape Fear River, visible through the expansive windows that filled the entire east wall of the luxurious suite. The sky transformed into a vibrant painting of orange, red, and purple, reflecting on the dark river waters like a second moving masterpiece. The suite itself was a study in minimalist elegance, modern furnishings in neutral tones, strategically placed lighting, and subtle personal touches suggesting that Jordan had temporarily claimed this space as his own. A Chicago Bulls jacket, casually draped over a chair back. Family photographs in small silver frames sat atop a work desk. A pair of pristine white training shoes rested beside the doorway to the bedroom. Brandon remained near the entrance, still uneasy with the scale of the space and the unexpected intimacy of being in someone else's private domain. Despite their mentor-mentee connection, in many ways, Jordan was still a stranger, a living legend whose face adorned billboards and television commercials. "Wow, so this is what legends live like," Brandon commented, unable to contain his astonishment, his eyes taking in the opulent details of the suite. "I think my house could fit inside here 3 times over." Jordan smiled slightly, observing the boy's reaction as he moved through the expansive living room. His footsteps were silent on the thick carpet as he approached an elegant, genuine leather suitcase, discreetly positioned in a corner of the room next to a built-in bookcase. The case, with the golden initials MJ embossed on its surface, stood in stark contrast to the modern decor, an antique object, well-worn, bearing the marks of time and countless journeys. Jordan knelt beside it, his fingers moving purposefully over the brass clasps. There was a nearly reverent quality to his movements, as if he were about to open not just a suitcase, but a portal to carefully preserved memories. The silence between them took on an expectant quality, filled only by the distant rumble of traffic below and the soft hum of the air conditioning. "When I was about your age, right here in this city, I also faced bullies," Jordan began, his voice taking on a contemplative tone as his fingers continued to work the suitcase clasp. "Especially after I was cut from the basketball team. Back then, many thought it was the end of the line for my aspirations. I was skinny, not as tall as I am now, and the other boys, well, they knew exactly where to stick the knife and twist." Brandon took a few steps closer, his defensive posture easing slightly in the face of the unexpected vulnerability in Jordan's voice. "Everyone knows that story," he responded, folding his arms across his chest in an unconscious gesture of protection. "It's practically legendary. You worked hard and came back stronger the following year. Rejection transformed into fuel. It's the quintessential example of perseverance, the kind adults use to inspire children." Jordan nodded, a cryptic smile playing on his lips as he finally managed to unfasten the suitcase's clasps. He lifted the lid carefully, revealing the interior meticulously organized, almost militarily precise. Perfectly folded clothes, toiletries in leather cases, documents in orderly folders. But his gaze shifted to a side compartment, secured by an additional zipper. Yes, but what people don't know is that I had another refuge besides basketball, he continued, cautiously opening the compartment. Something that sustained me during those moments when the pain of rejection was too intense to channel solely into shots and dribbling. The tension in the air was almost palpable as Jordan extracted a rectangular object wrapped in dark blue velvet from the suitcase. With deliberate slowness, he removed the protective fabric, revealing an antique photo album, its leather cover worn but clearly well maintained. The initials DJ were delicately embossed in the lower right corner. Not his own initials, Brandon noted, but likely those of his mother, Dolores Jordan. A pregnant silence stretched for a few seconds as Jordan simply held the album, his gaze distant, as if momentarily elsewhere, in another time. Finally, he gestured for Brandon to approach and sit beside him on the elegant sofa near the panoramic window. "This album travels with me everywhere," Jordan said, his voice surprisingly soft. 23 championships, hundreds of hotels, dozens of countries. It's always with me. My mother started it when I was 5. As Jordan opened the album, the pages rustled gently, revealing photographs meticulously preserved in protective plastic. Brandon leaned closer, his curiosity momentarily overcoming his discomfort. The initial pages depicted expected family scenes. A young Michael with his siblings, birthday celebrations, backyard basketball games. But then Jordan turned to a specific section in the middle of the album, and Brandon blinked several times, unsure if he was truly seeing what appeared before his eyes. A full-page sepia photograph depicted a young Michael Jordan, no more than 14 or 15 years old, clad in the formal attire of a choir boy, a black robe and white stole, standing at the pulpit of the Wilmington Baptist Church. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly agape, a microphone held with the same assuredness he would later command a basketball in front of millions. Subsequent pages showcase similar imagery. Jordan with other young singers, Jordan receiving an award, Jordan clearly performing a solo at some special presentation. "You sang in the church choir?" Brandon asked, his voice betraying utter disbelief as his eyes scanned the images that contradicted everything he thought he knew about the man beside him. Michael Jordan. The Michael Jordan singing in a choir. How did this never leak into the media? Jordan smiled, gently tracing his fingers over one photograph, a striking image of a poised woman with stern but gentle eyes adjusting her stole moments before a performance. "My mother, Dolores, insisted all her children participate in the choir," he explained, his tone imbued with the profound respect reserved solely for discussions about his mother. "She believed singing was a form of prayer, that when we sang, we weren't merely producing music. We were elevating our souls. For a woman of her faith, it was as vital as attending school, perhaps even more so." Jordan continued turning the pages, revealing more photographs of his youth in the choir, some from regional competitions, others from special church services. In one particularly poignant image, a youthful Michael stood at the center of a small group, clearly the lead soloist at a significant event. His fingers lingered on this picture for a longer moment, a wistful smile softening his typically intense features. "Believe it or not, there was a time when my voice was more recognized than my ball handling skills, at least in church." "How did this never become part of Michael Jordan's official story?" Brandon inquired, genuinely perplexed. "I mean, there are entire books written about you, documentaries, that Looney Tunes movie, and no one ever mentions you were a choir singer?" The pages continued to turn, progressing through the years, increasingly recent photographs, some already in vibrant color. Jordan paused at a later section of the album and showed a photograph that could not have been more than 10 or 15 years old. Him, significantly older, surrounded by a group of at least 20 smiling children, all wearing simple t-shirts with the logo of a Chicago public school. The contrast between the billionaire in his elegant suit and the children clearly from a disadvantaged community was visually striking. Behind them, a modest school auditorium stage with an old piano and some music sheet racks. 10 years ago, I visited a school in a disadvantaged neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, Jordan explained, his voice taking on a more serious tone. It was part of a foundation outreach program, Just another celebrity visit to motivate at-risk children, as politicians like to call them. But when I got there, I discovered something more. They had a choir, quite good in fact, and were about to cancel their inter-school festival performance because the music teacher had suddenly fallen ill. Pneumonia, severe enough to require hospitalization. The children were devastated. They had been working for months. His eyes met Brandon's, an intensity burning in them. Without much thought, I offered to help. The words simply tumbled out of my mouth before I could consider the implications. Brandon leaned closer, completely absorbed by the story, his defensive posture forgotten as he tried to process this new facet of the man he thought he knew through headlines, documentaries, and casual conversations. "You taught them to sing?" he asked, picturing Michael Jordan conducting choir rehearsals, like in some inspirational Hollywood film. "Not exactly," Jordan replied, turning the page to reveal more photographs from that same day. Him at the piano, him gesturing to the children, him clearly singing along with the group. They already knew how to sing. What they lacked was confidence without their teacher. They were petrified at the thought of taking the stage without her. So I sang with them. I spent 3 afternoons at that school, recalling skills I hadn't seriously used since my mother was alive. A gentle smile illuminated his face, to demonstrate that they didn't need to fear trying, even if they weren't perfect. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something is more important than that fear. The subsequent photographs showcased the apparent outcome of this endeavor. The children on stage in a larger auditorium, clearly participating in some kind of performance or competition. Each image displayed expressions ranging from intense concentration to pure joy. And there was Jordan, not center stage as one might expect of a celebrity, but in the back row, almost hidden amongst the children, singing along as just another member of the group. The final photograph in the series showed the children raising a trophy, their faces illuminated by unrestrained smiles. "And what does this have to do with Laney High's talent show?" inquired Brandon, beginning to connect the dots on his own, yet eager to hear Jordan's direct confirmation. "Why accept Tyler's ludicrous challenge after all these years of keeping this part of your life private?" Jordan carefully closed the album, his movements deliberate as he replaced the protective velvet around it before responding. His gaze fell upon the vista of the Cape Fear River, where the last hues of sunset were yielding to the deep blue of early evening. "I made a promise to those children," he finally stated, his voice carrying the weight of a long-considered decision. "On the last day when we were celebrating second place in the festival, which was an extraordinary victory considering the circumstances, a little girl asked me why I never sang in public, if I had the talent for it. She said she would one day sing in public again, to show that we all possess many talents, some we don't even know we have until challenged, some that we keep hidden out of fear of judgment." A contemplative silence descended between them as the implications of those words hung heavy in the air. Brandon viewed the man beside him with fresh eyes, seeing not just the basketball legend or the billionaire icon, but someone with unexpected complexities and vulnerabilities. Outside, the city lights began to punctuate the encroaching darkness, creating a shimmering backdrop to their conversation. "So you're actually going to sing in front of the entire school?" Brandon finally asked, his voice now softer, the accusatory tone completely absent. "Will you risk your reputation, perhaps even suffer embarrassment, just to keep a promise to a group of children who likely no longer remember it?" "In front of whoever may appear," Jordan confirmed, rising to carefully stow the album in his briefcase. When he turned back to Brandon, a confident smile graced his face. Not the arrogance of a celebrity, but the quiet certainty of someone who had made a decision aligned with their deepest values. "Those children reminded me of something my mother always said. Your talents are gifts from God. Keeping them hidden is like returning a gift unopened." Jordan walked to the window, his silhouette etched against the city lights. "But I'll need help. I haven't sung seriously in a decade. And my technique, well, let's just say it's as rusty as my knees on cold days." The shared moment of vulnerability was interrupted by the sharp ring of Jordan's phone. He pulled the device from his pocket, glancing briefly at the screen before answering. "Jordan speaking," he responded in a professional tone. As he listened, his relaxed expression gradually transformed, lines of concern creasing his forehead. His eyes turned to Brandon, a sudden gravity in them that made the boy's stomach sink before he even knew why. I understand, yes. Thank you for calling. We'll be there immediately. I'm going immediately, he said, already moving toward the door with renewed purpose. Brandon, your friend Jaden had a bicycle accident and is in the hospital asking for you. His mother tried calling your house but obviously didn't get an answer, so she called Principal Jameson, who had my emergency contact. Brandon's face paled instantly, all color draining away like water down a drain. His eyes widened with genuine concern, and his slender frame seemed momentarily to lose all its energy. Jaden? Is he okay? He asked, his voice trembling slightly, reviving the image of the smiling friend who had been by his side in the auditorium just hours before. I don't have specific details, Jordan replied, already grabbing his car keys and jacket. His movements were efficient, focused, like in the final moments of a crucial game. I only know that he's at Wilmington Regional Hospital and specifically asked for you. Could you get ready in 2 minutes? The car's waiting downstairs. Brandon nodded automatically, still processing the news as he headed for the door. Then he stopped abruptly, turning back to Jordan with a confused expression. And the talent show? Your practice? Didn't you just say you needed help? That you hadn't sung seriously in years? Conflicting priorities wrestled on his face, concern for his friend against the strange responsibility he now felt for this new project. Jordan walked towards Brandon, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, a gesture conveying both comfort and firmness. For the first time, there seemed to be no distance between them. Not idol and fan, not mentor and protege, just two individuals facing a challenging moment together. Some things are more important, Brandon, he said simply, his voice carrying the wisdom of years and priorities clarified by experience. Always will be. Now let's go. Your friend needs you. As they swiftly exited the opulent suite, the city lights shone ever more intensely against the now completely dark sky. The photo album remained in the carefully closed suitcase, its stories momentarily suspended as new urgencies took precedence. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Brandon's thoughts oscillated between concern for Jaden and assimilation of Jordan's surprising revelations. However, one thing had definitively changed. The resentment he had carried upon entering the hotel had been replaced by something more complex, more nuanced. As if, for the first time, he was seeing Michael Jordan not as a distant icon or an imposed presence in his life, but as a real person with untold stories and carefully guarded vulnerabilities. A person who, perhaps, wasn't as different from himself as he had imagined. The corridors of Wilmington Regional Hospital were a sterile labyrinth of white walls and softly humming, fluorescent lights. The distinctive smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee permeated the air, mingling with the constant whisper of discreet conversations. Brandon and Jordan hurried through the emergency department, attracting incredulous glances from patients and staff who instantly recognized the towering figure of the former athlete. Turning down a corridor and there, near a small waiting room, was Vanessa Williams. Still in her nurse's uniform, she exuded exhaustion, yet her face lit up with palpable relief as they hurried towards her. "Mom, where is he? What happened?" Brandon's words gushed forth before they reached her fully, his voice trembling with a mixture of panic and guilt. Was it serious? Why was he cycling alone so late? Vanessa placed her hands on her son's shoulders, her touch firm yet gentle. Take a deep breath, Brandon. Jaden is stable and conscious. There's no cause for alarm. She looked at Jordan with evident gratitude. I am profoundly grateful for bringing him here so swiftly, Michael. I don't know how I would have located Brandon without your assistance. The hospital hallway was relatively quiet at that hour, with only a few staff members passing occasionally. The lights had been dimmed in the inpatient ward, creating a more serene atmosphere. Brandon was breathing rapidly, his anxiety palpable in every fidgety movement. Jordan remained a little detached, affording the necessary space for mother and son, yet his presence acted as a silent anchor of stability. How is Jaden? Brandon inquired anxiously, leaning forward. His fingers tightened nervously around the strap of the backpack he still carried, the knuckles whitening with the force of his grip. Did he ask for me himself? Are you sure? Vanessa nodded, her weary smile conveying professional reassurance. He broke his arm and suffered a mild concussion, but he'll be fine. He's a strong boy. She mechanically adjusted the ID badge clipped to her uniform pocket. And yes, the first thing he did when he regained consciousness was ask if someone had told you. Brandon visibly relaxed at the news. Jordan stepped forward, joining the conversation more directly. Thank you for the update, Vanessa. It was a tense journey. His deep voice carried genuine concern. It's the least I could do. May I see the boy? I'd like to wish him well in person. Vanessa appeared momentarily surprised by the request, but nodded with a gentle smile. Certainly. I believe he'll be extremely excited by your visit. A cryptic expression flitted across her face. Actually, there's someone else there you might want to see. Someone I know? Jordan slightly furrowed his brow, clearly intrigued. Here in Wilmington? See for yourself, Vanessa replied with a secretive smile, already turning to guide them down the hallway. Room 312, follow me. Vanessa stopped before the slightly ajar door, lightly knocked on the frame, and entered first. Brandon immediately followed, with Jordan bringing up the rear of the small procession. Look who I found, Vanessa announced cheerfully. Certain very concerned visitors. Jaden was propped up in his hospital bed, his right arm encased in a white sling. A small bandage covered a scraped area on his forehead, but his familiar smile shone brightly upon seeing Brandon. I'm reorganizing my schedule for this week. The bedroom door swung open again, drawing everyone's attention. To Brandon's astonishment, Tyler Jenkins and an older man, whose resemblance to Tyler could only be described as uncanny, stood in the doorway. Tyler appeared mortified by the occupant of the room, while the older man advanced confidently. Mr. Jordan, Tyler's father extended his hand enthusiastically. Rick Jenkins. I wasn't expecting to find you here. I came to check on Jaden. He was struck down right in front of our house. Our gardener found him and called for an ambulance immediately. Jordan shook his hand politely, though his gaze shifted to Tyler, who remained near the doorway, as if contemplating escape. Tyler, Jordan greeted with a curt nod. I see you also came to check on your colleague. A noble gesture. Yes, sir, Tyler replied, stammering slightly. Jaden lives near us. When I heard about the accident, he left the sentence unfinished. Rick Jenkins seemed oblivious to the palpable tension in the air. Tyler told me about the talent show challenge, he continued animatedly. As owner of WEC TV, I thought about broadcasting the event live. It would be excellent for the school's visibility, bringing attention to the artistic programs. Broadcast live, Jordan repeated, glancing at Brandon, who visibly paled, and then at Mr. Ray. The entire talent show? Absolutely, a charity event. We could raise funds for the arts program. Mr. Jenkins beamed broadly. I've already secured confirmation from 3 other stations. We're talking about statewide coverage, at the very least. Tyler watched his father with growing horror. His plan to humiliate Jordan at a small school event was rapidly escalating into a potentially national spectacle. Dad, maybe this isn't a good... Tyler began, his voice unusually strained. Don't be modest, son. It was a brilliant idea, Mr. Jenkins interrupted, patting Tyler's shoulder. So, is it confirmed? Live broadcast next Friday? Jordan looked at Mr. Ray, at Brandon, and finally at Tyler, who now appeared deeply regretful. It's going to be quite a show, Jordan finally replied with a cryptic smile. The Laney High School music room rested in absolute silence that Friday afternoon, a stark contrast to the commotion that would engulf the campus in just a few hours. Late afternoon golden rays filtered through the large acoustic windows, creating luminous patterns on the polished wooden floor. The imposing black Steinway grand piano occupied center stage, its lid raised like the wing of a majestic bird poised for flight. In a corner, semicircular metal shelves silently held various instruments, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Brandon Williams sat in a chair at the back of the room, his fingers drumming nervously as he observed the improbable duet that had dominated his life for the past week. Mr. Harold Ray meticulously adjusted the piano bench, his aged but precise fingers testing individual notes, verifying the tuning with meticulous attention. A few feet away, Michael Jordan engaged in systematic stretching exercises, shoulders, neck, jaw, as if preparing for Game 7 of the NBA Finals. You've been training this for a week, Brandon said, rising and pacing the perimeter of the room. The show starts in 2 hours. Shouldn't you be preparing in the university auditorium? Checking the sound? Getting familiar with the stage? Jordan paused his stretching, turning to face Brandon. Dark circles beneath his eyes bore witness to sleepless nights devoted to vocal practice. I'm more comfortable here, he simply replied, his voice noticeably raspy, rough as fine sandpaper against wood. This space holds good memories. It reminds me of the church hall where I began. Mr. Ray seized the pause to play some experimental notes on the piano, acutely attuned to the room's acoustic response. Decades of trained hearing allowed him to discern nuances that would escape almost anyone else, and his expression gradually transformed into concern. He gestured for Jordan to approach, indicating the chair beside the piano. When Jordan complied, Mr. Ray played a simple scale, gesturing for Jordan to repeat it vocally. The result was immediately alarming. Where previously a rich tone had resonated, now only a harsh whisper remained, with higher notes entirely inaccessible. Your voice is tired, Michael. Extremely tired, Mr. Ray declared, concern palpable in his tone. His aged but firm fingers pressed some lower keys, offering an alternative. We've been pushing too hard. You haven't rested sufficiently between sessions. Jordan took a sip from the water bottle he'd been constantly carrying for the past few days. I'm fine, he insisted, though his raspy voice contradicted his words. I've been through worse. It's just a bit of vocal fatigue. No, it's not, Mr. Ray corrected, his tone calm yet authoritative, as he played a few more notes to underscore his point. You're barely hitting the high notes now, and even the mid-range is unstable. You could be on the verge of vocal nodules if you keep pushing it like this. His hands glided across the keyboard, transposing the melody to a lower key. Perhaps we should shift to a lower key. It would sacrifice some of the emotional impact in the chorus, but it would be safer for your current condition. There's no time to relearn everything, Jordan retorted, his voice fractured with stubborn determination as he drank more water. We're sticking to the original plan. Original key, original arrangement. The sound of the music room door opening interrupted the discussion. Tyler Jenkins hesitantly appeared in the doorway, his hands shoved into the pockets of his basketball team jacket. His face, usually fixed in an arrogant air of confidence, now displayed a vulnerability almost shocking. He remained at the threshold as if unsure if he were welcome. Brandon immediately rose to a defensive posture. What are you doing here? Did you come to spy on the preparations to ensure your plan of humiliation proceeds as planned? Tyler seemed genuinely hurt by the accusation. I just wanted to talk to Mr. Jordan before the show, he explained, his voice noticeably softer. It's important. Jordan gestured for Tyler to approach, indicating a chair near the piano. What is it, Tyler? I thought you'd be busy assisting your father with the broadcast preparations. Tyler cautiously moved into the room. I came to ask you to quit, he declared finally, the words spilling out in a hurried rush. Quit the talent show. Don't do it. What? Brandon and Jordan exclaimed in unison, their voices blending into sheer surprise. Brandon stepped forward. You orchestrated all this, and now you want him to quit? 2 hours before the show? Tyler visibly swallowed. I didn't know my father would turn this into a statewide televised event. It was supposed to be just a prank, a challenge between us at school, he said, his gaze directed at the floor, guilt palpable in his posture. I've seen how your voice has been in rehearsals this week. I know you'll be embarrassed, and I don't want to be responsible for ruining your reputation in front of millions. Why did you challenge me that day, Tyler? Not the excuse, not the bravado. The truth. Jordan's voice, despite its raspy quality, possessed a quiet authority demanding honesty. Tyler hesitated before taking a deep breath. Because you visited our school 3 years ago, for the grand opening of the renovated gym, he began, his words clearly labored. I was in line for 2 hours to get your autograph, holding a Bulls jersey that belonged to my brother. But you left before you reached me. His voice faltered slightly. It was the 10th anniversary of my older brother, Kevin's, death. He was your biggest fan. He had posters, collected your cards, watched every game. A damp sheen appeared in Tyler's eyes. The jersey was the only thing I had left of him. Jordan closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the impact of the words. I'm so sorry about that. I didn't know. How old was he? Your brother? 16, Tyler replied. Car accident. He was the quarterback. Very popular. Very different from me, actually. A wistful smile touched his face. I was the annoying little brother who he let watch Bulls games with him. After he died, I kind of tried to be like him, you know? And became the bully he never was, Brandon gently finished, his initial hostility dissipating. Because it was easier than dealing with the pain. Tyler nodded slowly. How could I know? Anyway, that doesn't justify what I did. It was childish and petty. He looked directly at Jordan. Please, drop out of the show. We can announce you're ill. Jordan placed a hand on the teenager's shoulder. I appreciate your concern, Tyler, and I admire your courage in coming here today. Few would have that strength. His grip on the boy's shoulder tightened slightly. But I'm going to participate, not because of the challenge, no longer, for a completely different reason. But your voice, Mr. Ray began, professional concern overriding the emotional moment. It'll be fine, Jordan affirmed, with the same unwavering confidence that had characterized his career. I played with a 40-degree fever against the Utah Jazz. I can still sing, though my throat is raw. As they exited to the parking lot, Mr. Ray gently grasped Jordan's arm, pulling him aside as the teenager surged ahead. Michael, are you sure about the song you've chosen? His eye is on the sparrow, is intensely personal, laden with memories of your mother, and with your voice in this state. It's the right song, Mr. Ray. Jordan's voice, despite the persistent raspy quality, held an unwavering resolve. It's time to honor my mother. It's time to fulfill that promise I made to the children of the Chicago choir. The arrival at the university campus was almost surreal. Television broadcast vehicles lined the main parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the night sky. A massive throng packed the auditorium entrance. Students, faculty, local residents, even a few recognizable figures from the sports world. Crudely made posters and banners proclaimed support for various competitors, but overwhelmingly for Jordan. Security personnel, their walkie-talkies crackling, formed a perimeter, maintaining order. They were escorted by a production assistant through winding corridors to the backstage area. There, the organized chaos of any live production was evident. Technicians adjusting lights, sound engineers testing microphones, makeup artists preparing nervous participants. Jordan's presence caused a momentary flurry before professionalism reasserted itself. They were led to a small preparation room where water bottles, throat lozenges, and a full-length mirror awaited. As soon as the door closed, Jordan began to cough violently. It wasn't a mere cough, but deep spasms that shook his entire body, forcing him to lean against the nearby wall. The fit lasted nearly a full minute, leaving him visibly shaken. Are you all right? Brandon asked, concern evident as he hurried forward. This doesn't seem normal. Perhaps we should call a doctor. Jordan shook his head, still unable to speak. After a few moments, he attempted to sing a few basic notes of the melody. The outcome was alarming. What emerged was a harsh, fractured sound, barely recognizable as musical notes. Mr. Ray quickly approached, placing a seasoned hand on Jordan's throat. Your voice is utterly spent, he declared gravely. This isn't just ordinary fatigue, Michael. You've overtaxed your vocal cords without proper conditioning. You can't sing like this. It could cause permanent damage. 20 minutes until curtain time. A stagehand's animated voice echoed through the hallway. Mr. Jordan, you're the last performer. Jordan slumped heavily into a chair, clutching his throat, his face exhibiting something rarely seen by the public. Genuine defeat. Perhaps this is a sign, he rasped, his words barely audible. Some promises cannot be fulfilled. Mr. Ray surveyed the small room, as if searching for a solution. Then his gaze fixed on Jordan. Michael, remember the Easter recital of '76? He asked, leaning forward with renewed energy. When you contracted severe laryngitis 2 days before the performance. Jordan nodded slowly. The Were You There solo which my mother so desperately wanted to hear, he recalled. I was devastated. I cried all night when the doctor told me I couldn't sing. And what did your mother say that day? Mr. Ray pressed, his eyes gleaming intensely. A faint smile touched Jordan's face. She said, when words fail, the heart can still sing. His voice, though raspy, carried the reverence of one reciting a sacred personal text. And what did we do? Mr. Ray was now completely energized. How did we transform that potential failure into one of the most powerful moments that congregation had ever witnessed? Jordan looked at him, an idea beginning to coalesce. You played the piano, he slowly recalled. And I... Yes, Mr. Ray exclaimed, clapping his hands once in satisfaction. You didn't sing conventionally. You spoke the words with emotion, with meaning, with intention. And the piano's music carried the rest. And it can work again, Mr. Ray said. I can play the piano as before. You can speak the words, but we need someone for the vocal part, someone who already knows the music. Everyone looked at Brandon, who recoiled in horror. No, absolutely not. I've never sung in public. We would only need you to speak the words with feeling, Mr. Ray explained. The piano would provide the melody. 10 minutes, the stagehand shouted. We need confirmation now. Jordan sprang to his feet, locking eyes with Brandon, his gaze conveying vulnerability and hope. Would you help me keep my promise? Not for me, but for my mother's memory and the children of that Chicago choir. The University of North Carolina auditorium pulsed with palpable energy, the air vibrating with anticipation. Every one of the 2,000 seats was filled. Professors, students, local residents, and visitors who had traveled far to witness the event. In the front rows, familiar faces from the basketball world were visible. Former Bulls teammates, legendary coaches, even some historical rivals who had squared off against Jordan on the court. Strategically placed cameras captured every angle of the scene, broadcasting live to millions of viewers across the state and beyond. Behind the scenes, lighting and sound technicians made final adjustments, producers whispering frantically into their headsets. The murmur of conversation filled the space until the main lights began a gradual dimming, signaling the commencement of the final presentation. An expectant hush fell over the crowd as a single spotlight illuminated the center stage, where Principal Amanda Jamison emerged, dressed in a navy blazer, her perfectly coiffed hair reflecting the intense light. Her professional smile couldn't entirely mask the nervousness in the face of the magnitude of this school event. I'm so nervous I can barely breathe, a stagehand whispered to the lighting operator, her hands trembling as she adjusted the spotlight. It's Michael Jordan, for crying out loud. I never thought I'd be operating lights for Michael Jordan. Principal Jamison approached the central microphone, discreetly adjusting her blazer as her voice resonated clear and controlled through the high-quality sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed audience, media representatives, and special guests, she began, her words carefully measured. Welcome to the culmination of the 42nd annual Emsley A. Laney High School Talent Showcase. A brief pause was followed by polite applause. Tonight has already offered us extraordinary performances by our talented students, showcasing the artistic excellence we cultivate within our institution. His gaze briefly swept across the front row, where the school board and prominent sponsors watched intently. And now it is an unprecedented and profoundly honored occasion to introduce our final competitor of the evening, a man requiring no introduction, yet deserving everyone. Michael Jordan. The ensuing roar was deafening, an explosion of applause, cheers, and whistles that threatened the very structure of the auditorium. The audience surged into a spontaneous standing ovation before anyone even appeared on stage. When the lights finally began their gradual ascent, revealing the stage, a palpable wave of bewilderment rippled through the spectators. There were no extravagant flourishes, no backing dancers, no full orchestra, just a magnificent Steinway grand piano elegantly positioned on the left, where Mr. Harold Ray was already seated, his aged hands patiently resting upon the keys. In the center, two solitary microphones waited, creating an image of almost disconcerting simplicity given the heightened anticipation. Where is he? Is he late? Murmured a woman in the third row, craning her neck for a better view. My husband paid a fortune for these tickets, A disconcerting silence descended as, instead of the anticipated solo entrance of the basketball legend, two figures emerged together from the wings, one tall and imposing, the other small and visibly tense. Michael Jordan, clad in a perfectly tailored black suit with a subtle navy blue tie that harmonized with his pocket square, moved with the same assuredness he had demonstrated in countless championship finals. Beside him, to the astonishment and bewilderment of the audience, stood the diminutive Brandon Williams, appearing minuscule in his own, clearly new and slightly oversized suit, his eyes wide with the terror of confronting the throng. The contrast between them was stark, the legendary giant and the unknown youth, side by side under the unforgiving glare of the spotlights. In the front rows, Vanessa Williams covered her mouth in utter surprise at seeing her son walk onto the stage alongside Michael Jordan. Not far from her, Rick Jenkins frowned in confusion, while Tyler, seated rigidly beside him, watched with a mixture of apprehension and fascination. "Who is this kid?" queried a former Lakers player to his seatmate. "This wasn't on the schedule." Jordan approached the first microphone with measured steps, projecting the outward calm that had always been his hallmark in moments of peak pressure. When he finally spoke, the difference in his voice was immediately palpable to all. Not the resonant baritone familiar to sports reporters and fans, but a raspy tone, almost a hoarse whisper, demanding absolute quiet to be understood. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice trembling, each word a discernible effort. "First, I want to thank Tyler Jenkins for this challenge." His eyes briefly met the teenager in the audience, who seemed to shrink under the public recognition. Sometimes we need a nudge to fulfill old promises, to do the things we know we should do, but keep postponing out of fear or convenience. The audience remained in absolute silence, collectively leaning forward, straining to capture every word uttered by the weakened voice of the legend. Jordan paused briefly, taking a small sip of water from a discreetly placed glass near the microphone. His normally impassive face revealed subtle flickers of emotion, a slight tremor at the corner of his mouth, an unusual depth in his gaze. Beside him, Brandon remained utterly still, as if any movement might shatter the fragile equilibrium that held him on stage. Mr. Ray watched intently from the piano, his fingers poised over the keys, ready for the opportune moment. The tension in the air was almost tangible, thick and vibrant, like the final seconds before a decisive throw in a tied game. "Unfortunately, my voice isn't cooperating tonight," Jordan continued, lightly touching his throat in a revealing gesture. "Weeks of intense rehearsal after decades without vocal practice." A small smile touched his lips, momentarily softening the intensity of his expression. "But as my mother, Dolores Jordan, used to say, when words fail, the heart can still sing." She was a wise woman who understood that our limitations often pave the way for possibilities we would never have considered. Dolores Jordan's name hung in the air like a nearly tangible presence, forging an intimate connection between the public figure and the audience. Jordan turned slightly, his gaze now directed at Brandon, who seemed locked in an internal struggle between a desire to flee and a resolve to remain. There was something profoundly moving in the way the man who had faced the world's greatest athletes now supported a nervous 12-year-old boy, conveying quiet strength solely through his presence. In the front rows, Vanessa Williams discreetly dabbed a tear, while Mr. Ray subtly adjusted his position on the piano bench, preparing. "Tonight, I'll share a deeply personal song that was sung at my mother's funeral," Jordan continued, his voice now imbued with an emotion rarely displayed in public. "A song that sustained me during the most challenging moments of my life, reminding me that we are never truly alone, even when loneliness feels overwhelming." He paused, his gaze briefly sweeping the crowded auditorium before returning to Brandon. "Tonight, I need the help of this courageous young man beside me. Brandon Williams lost his father, just as I lost mine. He understands the profound meaning of losing someone you love deeply, but also the meaning of finding the strength to move forward, to continue living, and even to help others in their pain." A soft murmur rippled through the audience, some recognizing the foundation's name, others surprised by the personal connection revealed. Brandon finally moved, nervously adjusting the bow tie, clearly unfamiliar with its use. Under the intense lights, every bead of sweat on his forehead was visible, every tremor in his hands amplified. At the piano, Mr. Ray began to play, not immediately the main melody, but gentle introductory chords, creating a comforting sonic tapestry for the two figures center stage. The notes flowed like placid water, filling the auditorium with a musical presence that seemed to soothe even Brandon's racing breath. "Ready?" Jordan whispered to him, low enough for only Brandon to hear, yet with an intensity that conveyed complete confidence in his ability. The moment was intimate, almost sacred, captured by cameras yet somehow remaining private between mentor and protege. Brandon nodded nervously, swallowing hard as he approached the second microphone. His hands trembled visibly, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed he might freeze completely. Then his eyes met his mother's in the audience, that look of unconditional pride that only mothers can convey, and something subtly shifted in his posture. His shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly, his chin lifted a fraction more. It was a subtle but undeniable transformation, like a hesitant flower finally deciding to unfurl to the morning sun. Mr. Ray increased the volume and intensity of his performance, and the familiar melody of "His Eye is on the Sparrow" finally emerged in its fullness, filling every corner of the auditorium with notes simultaneously melancholic and hopeful. A deeply rooted gospel tradition, the music was imbued with history and meaning for many in the audience. Brandon closed his eyes briefly, as if drawing courage from the deepest recesses of his being, and then began to recite the words, his voice initially trembling and almost inaudible. "Why should I be discouraged? Why should shadows fall?" Beside him, Jordan remained eyes closed, utterly still, as if absorbing every note, every word, every moment of that shared experience. "Her voice is so pure," a woman whispered to her husband in the audience, "so young and so full of genuine feeling." And then, like an unexpected miracle that made several people in the audience audibly gasp, Jordan's voice resurfaced, not in the traditional singing form everyone had anticipated, but in a sort of spoken melody, an emotional counterpoint accompanying Brandon's words. It was raspy, imperfect, occasionally fragile on the edges, but imbued with such raw, such pure, such demonstrably genuine emotion that several audience members immediately brought their hands to their eyes, unable to contain the spontaneously arising tears. "When I know he watches over me," Jordan spoke, the words emerging not from his damaged throat, but from somewhere deeper, more essential. Something extraordinary began to unfold as the music progressed. As if fueled by the confidence of the legend beside him, the mastery of Mr. Ray at the piano, and the respectful silence of the audience, Brandon's voice gradually gained strength and clarity. His words, initially hesitant and timid, became firmer, more resolute, carrying an emotion seemingly impossible for someone so young. Simultaneously, Jordan's spoken melody acquired an almost hypnotic quality, finding rhythms and cadences that transform vocal limitations into a novel form of expression. Together, they created something entirely unforeseen, not a polished, perfect performance, but a moment of shared truth that transcended technique and expectations. Mr. Ray, sensing the unfolding magic, played the piano with masterful sensitivity, underlining each word with precise notes, crafting spaces for breath, for feeling, for connection. "When loneliness strikes and my heart is torn asunder," Brandon recited, his voice now projecting clearly throughout the auditorium, each word carrying an understanding that surpassed his years. "He guides and watches me. He never leaves me alone." In the audience, faces of all ages, races, and backgrounds displayed the same expression of moved astonishment. Brandon's mother wept silently, tears freely tracing paths down her face as she watched her son, the shy boy who could barely manage a science presentation without stammering, now standing under the spotlights beside Michael Jordan, reciting words of hope and faith with growing confidence. A few rows behind, Tyler Jenkins stared, his young face registering the gradual realization that his plan for humiliation had morphed into something entirely different, something profoundly meaningful that was touching everyone present. Beside him, his father had abandoned the calculated expression of a media executive, always assessing the commercial value of what he saw, his face now betraying an unintentional, genuine, and spontaneous emotion. "I sing because I am happy," Brandon recited, his voice now almost musical in its cadence. "I sing because I am free." As they neared the final chorus, something solidified between Jordan and Brandon, a perfect synchronicity, as if they had rehearsed for months, not days. Their eyes met briefly, and a slight nod from Jordan signaled the culminating moment. Mr. Ray, attuned to every nuance, increased the volume and intensity of his accompaniment, his aging hands moving with the fluidity and precision of a conductor at the peak of his powers. The entire auditorium held its breath collectively, as if fearing to break the spell with the slightest sound. His voice liberated the boy, Vanessa thought, watching her son transform on stage. Not just the physical voice, but the courage to be heard. When they finally reached the final chorus, Brandon and Jordan spoke together in perfect harmony, their voices, one young and clear, the other mature and raspy, merging into a single declaration of faith and resilience. "I know he watches over me." The final chord of the piano, under Mr. Ray's masterful fingers, resonated through the auditorium, expanding outward like ripples on a lake, until finally fading into an absolute, almost reverent silence, for several seconds which seemed simultaneously instantaneous and eternal. No one moved, no one applauded, no one made any sound. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing the moment to permanently etch itself into the memory of everyone present. "I've never seen anything like this," a cameraman whispered to his assistant, his camera still firmly pointed at the stage. Having already covered 3 Olympic Games, the audience, beginning slowly in the back rows and building progressively like an inexorable wave approaching the shore, started to rise. It wasn't a coordinated or planned ovation, but a spontaneous surge of recognition, honor, gratitude for what they had witnessed. The applause quickly swelled in volume and intensity, escalating to a truly deafening roar. A continuous thunder of approval mingled with screams and whistles that seemed to threaten the auditorium's roof. Some wept, unable to produce any sound beyond choked sobs, while others clapped so fiercely their hands turned crimson. In the technical booths, producers and directors watched in astonishment as the audience meter spiked, while on social media, videos of the moment began to spread with viral velocity. "This is far bigger than basketball," a former Jordan teammate murmured, discreetly wiping a tear. "Far bigger than any championship." On stage, Jordan protectively placed an arm around Brandon's shoulders, and together they bowed formally to the audience. The contrast between them remained, the towering man and the slight boy, the global legend and the unknown student, but now a palpable connection, a genuine partnership forged through shared vulnerability, was evident. Brandon's face, hours before displaying the absolute terror of one walking to execution, now blossomed into a radiant smile, his eyes gleaming under the stage lights. At the piano, Mr. Ray watched with obvious pride, his own smile illuminating his aged features. When they finally exited the stage after 3 insistent calls for their return from the audience, they were greeted backstage by a throng of technicians, assistants, and former performers, all simultaneously trying to express admiration and gratitude for the spectacle they had witnessed. "You've transformed a talent show into something transcendental," commented Director Jameson, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. "This will never be forgotten in the history of this school." After several minutes of congratulations and well wishes, finally navigating the crowded hallways and finding a moment of relative quiet, they saw a solitary figure waiting for them near the performer's exit. Tyler Jenkins remained motionless, his young face etched with undisguised tears that left glistening trails across his cheeks. Gone was the arrogance of his posture, the confident bully who had publicly challenged a global legend. In its place stood only a vulnerable teenager, finally able to shed the mask he had worn for so long. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, laden with an emotion he clearly wasn't accustomed to expressing openly. "Sorry," he said simply, the 2 syllables containing years of accumulated regret, not just for the recent challenge, but for everything, for the bully he had become, for the shield of hostility he had erected around his pain, for everything. The auditorium was packed. Teachers, students, celebrities, and strategically positioned TV cameras. The lights dimmed as Principal Jameson ascended the stage, adjusting her microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an extraordinary honor to present our final competitor of the evening, Michael Jordan. A thunderous applause erupted. The lights revealed a grand piano where Mr. Ray sat, and two microphones centered stage. To the audience's surprise, two figures walked to the center. Michael Jordan in a polished suit and the diminutive Brandon Williams. Jordan approached one of the microphones, his voice raspy, almost a whisper. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Tyler Jenkins for this challenge. Sometimes we need a nudge to fulfill old promises. He paused, taking a sip of water. Unfortunately, my voice isn't cooperating tonight. Jordan looked at Brandon, who seemed terrified under the spotlights. Tonight, I will share a deeply personal song sung at my mother's funeral. I need this brave young man's help. Brandon lost his father as I lost mine. He understands the meaning of loss, but finding the strength to move forward? Mr. Ray began to play softly. Brandon, visibly trembling, approached the second microphone. Ready? Jordan whispered. Brandon nodded nervously. The melody of His Eye is on the Sparrow filled the auditorium. Brandon began to recite, his voice shaky at first. Miraculously, Jordan's voice resurfaced, not as traditional singing, but as a spoken melody that accompanied Brandon's words. Her voice, though raspy and imperfect, pulsed with such raw emotion that several audience members were moved to tears. As the performance continued, Brandon's delivery gained strength and conviction. Jordan's spoken melody deepened in resonance. Mr. Ray's masterful piano playing underscored each word with exquisite precision. Brandon's mother wept silently in the audience. Tyler, mouth agape, watched in awe. His father, anticipating a spectacle of humiliation, remained utterly still, visibly affected. The final piano chord reverberated, ushering in an absolute hush. Then, rising slowly like a tidal wave, the audience erupted in a thunderous ovation. Jordan placed a protective arm on Brandon's shoulders, and together they bowed. Backstage, they found Tyler waiting, tears openly streaming down his face. Jordan extended his hand. Thank you for the challenge, Tyler. You've made me keep a vital promise. 2 weeks later, Principal Jameson announced that, thanks to donations generated by the performance, the school would establish 2 new programs, the Dolores Jordan Music Program and the James Jordan Mentoring Program. Brandon would be the first recipient of a full scholarship. That night, Brandon discovered a package on his bed containing a pair of exclusive Air Jordans. If Michael Jordan and Brandon Williams' journey resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and discover the next compelling narrative we've crafted for you. Until next time. And before you go, comment on where you're watching from and tell me, what did you think of the conclusion of this story?